Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we can meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the tragic murder of 61-year-old Carlo Secondino and the attempted murder of his daughter, Liana. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Now, before we get into the story, I need to say a quick thank you to today's sponsor, and today's sponsor is Dossier. Now, if you're not familiar with Dossier, don't you worry, you're about to get familiar with Dossier. Now, if you've been here a while, you've heard me sing the praises of Dossier for well over a year now, where I've been telling you that they create luxury scents. They're a fragrance company, for one, and they create luxury scents at a fraction of the luxury price tag, where most luxury perfumes can cost anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars. How dare they? Dossier's perfumes range anywhere from $29 to $49, and they offer bulk deals with up to 25% off and free shipping when you buy 3 bottles or more. Like, there are tons of ways to save your dollar bills, y'all. And well, did you know that they have branched into a new scent market and are now creating candles based off of some of their most popular fragrances? Did you know that? Well, I'm telling you now, so now you know it. So I have this big boy to share with you today. This is a candle in the scent Ambery Vanilla. It comes with a little card here that tells you all of the deets, and this is an exact scent match to their perfume Ambery Vanilla, which is a dupe of YSL's perfume in Black Opium. Black Opium A Day perfume, and this thing smells so good. I let my husband smell it and he thought this one was his favorite of all the scents that I picked up this time. It's so good. I can't explain what it smells like. It just smells delicious. And I actually have this perfume, the Ambery Vanilla perfume, and I have the feminine urge to have my perfume in my house smell the same, so that it's like wherever I am, if I leave my house, which I'm home. You know what I mean? Like, I just love that. And if you've ever wanted to try YSLs, but you're like, that's very expensive and also not cruelty-free, because that's one of the things about Dossier that attracted me to the brand in the first place, is they are a cruelty-free fragrance brand, and most high-end luxury scents are not cruelty-free, so that's just a big selling point for me personally. Anyways, guys, great news. Dossier is offering members of the Brat Pack 10% off of their order right now for a limited time if you click the link through my description box and use the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout. And the prices are already so good, like I can't imagine you're gonna find a better deal out there. So go ahead and click the link in my description box and use the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout to get 10% off your favorite new fragrance today. And now I just want to say a quick thank you to Dossier for sponsoring today's video, and a quick thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. Alright, now that I'm done spreading the good word of Dossier, we can go ahead and get into this video. Now, this is a video on a case that was suggested to me by a member of the Brat Pack named Summer. Hi, Summer. Thank you, Summer. And this is a video on a case that is out of New York. I feel like I've been kicking it in New York a while now with this case, and then also the Tessa Majors case that I believe, at the time you're watching this, that one was uploaded a few weeks ago, but I could be wrong, because when you're pre-filming, when you upload in advance, and you have an ever-changing upload schedule, I don't know how close they're actually going to be to each other, but I just researched them at about the same time. Anyways, guys, this is a newer case. This is an ongoing case. The murder actually took place in December of 2022, so fairly recent at the time that you're watching this. And at the time that I'm filming this, there has been an arrest, an arraignment, and a confession. With that said, I'm very curious to see how this case plays out. I'm very curious to see if the person who has been arrested ends up pleading guilty or not guilty, because though there has been a confession, you can still plead not guilty and we can still go to trial. We see people who confess and then plead not guilty all the time, but I'm curious to see how this all plays out, because the person who's been arrested and who has confessed is somebody who is known to the victims and somebody who has a volatile relationship with the victims. And what's interesting about this case to me is that though the victims and the person arrested did have a volatile history, this particular attack, based on everything I've read, seems to be unprovoked. So I'm very curious to see what this person is going to say for themselves about why this happened now. So today I'm going to tell you everything we know so far. I read all the things so that you do not have to. And at the end of this video, I'm going to ask you a question of the day. I want to give it to you now so you have it kicking around in your head while I tell you the entire story, but we will revisit it at the end. And that is this. What do you believe was the motive for the murder of Carlo and the attempted murder on his daughter, Liana? Now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of 61-year-old Carlo Secondino and the attempted murder of his daughter, 19-year-old Liana. In the early morning hours of December 29th, 2022, police received a call, and they responded to this call. And this was a call. How many times am I going to say call? It was a call, one more time, to the neighborhood of Bensonhurst, which is located in Brooklyn, New York, an area that a neighbor who lived in the area said nothing bad ever happened. Just before 6 a.m., police get to the apartment and they enter. This was an apartment that was above a heating and plumbing company. They were on the second floor. And as soon as they got there, they could see that something horrible had happened because there was blood everywhere. And when they were inspecting the scene, they found that there were 2 people who were suffering from multiple stab wounds. First, there was 19-year-old Nikki Secondino, who was outside of the home, and she had been stabbed multiple times in different areas of her body, but she was still alive. Barely, but she was still alive. And as they went into the apartment, they found 61-year-old Carlo Secondino laying in the kitchen on his back facing up and just surrounded by blood. He had been stabbed multiple times and beaten, and he was dead in the family kitchen. Now, Carlo actually had 2 daughters. He had his daughter Liana, and he had his other daughter who was actually older. This was 22-year-old Nikki. And Nikki was somehow alive. All she had as far as injuries was defensive wounds on her hands. So quickly, of course, police want to speak to her. And they ask her, like, what happened here? You know what I mean? And she told them that just before 6 a.m., 2 men broke into her home. There was a white man and a black man, and they were both wearing ski masks. And she said they came in and they attacked her family. And then they told her that they wanted to steal cash and to tell her, for her to tell them where the safe was. But the family didn't have a safe. She said that they got very angry and that they both sexually assaulted her before fleeing the apartment. So police start investigating, making their way through the home to recover any evidence that they could, and in the meantime, both girls were rushed to the hospital, and they were actually both taken to different hospitals. Nikki was taken to the NYU Langone Hospital, and Liana was taken to another hospital that I cannot pronounce for the life of me, and she was in critical condition due to her stab wounds. Carlo was not taken to the hospital because he was pronounced dead on the scene, and when the medical examiner came and examined him, it was determined that the manner of death was homicide, which, like, duh. I mean, look at the scene. It's very clear, but you know, they have to, this is their job. This is what they do. And the cause of death was from blunt force trauma and also sharp force injuries from being repeatedly stabbed. So police are at the home and they're investigating, and inside the home they discover both a knife and a hammer that they believe were used in the attack. And while they're there, they also speak to neighbors and find out all the information they could. And they find out for some mundane things, like one neighbor was like, oh, I was trying to leave for work, and at like 7 a.m. the whole street was blocked off, so I knew something was up. And another neighbor was like, oh yeah, there were helicopters circling everywhere, like things seemed crazy. And then another neighbor was like, oh, it's so weird because nothing like this ever happens here, and I knew that family, like I didn't know them, but I had seen them. It was just a father and his 2 daughters, and they kept to themselves and they were very private. Like I have no idea how anything like this could ever happen. But then they spoke to one neighbor who gave them a ton of information. This was a neighbor who actually had kind of been a witness to the entire attack. Not completely, she didn't see everything that happened, but she heard a lot of it and she did see some of it. And she was somebody who wanted to be like left unidentified. Like her name is out there, but she did ask, so I'm not gonna say her name. But basically she said that she had been awoken in the morning to the sounds of screaming and Nikki banging on her door, like yelling, oh my God, please open the door, with the sound of Carlo in the background screaming this person's name and saying, call 911. The neighbor said that from the outside, she could just hear what sounded like bodies being slammed into the walls. She said that she did open the door for a moment and peek out, but what she saw terrified her, so she slammed the door shut. Shut. And she said specifically of this, and I quote, I saw blood in the hallway, and that's when I got shaken up. I saw blood in the hallway, and I closed it. This neighbor also said, and this part was really sad for me, she said that when she looked out, like she heard wrestling and she heard movement and she heard all that, but what she saw was Carlo. She could see from her vantage point Carlo laying on the kitchen floor, just staring straight up, not moving. And she said what she remembers most is just that his chest was covered in red, and it looked like he was wearing a red vest. So this terrified woman locks herself in her house and she calls 911, and through the door she can hear that Nikki's now doing the same. Nikki's calling 911 and reporting that her house has been robbed, and that the attackers, the robbers, stabbed her father and her sister. As soon as neighbors heard what happened, they were terrified because at this time, now I guess, now crime in New York has been on the rise. So for that to be happening and then for this family to literally be attacked and stabbed in their home where they should be safe, seemingly while they were sleeping, they were terrified of what this could mean for their neighborhood. And then when people who knew Carlo heard what happened and heard that it was him who was killed, they were devastated. Now, I couldn't find a lot about Carlo out there. This is a new case. People haven't been speaking out quite as much. I was able to find out some information based on interviews that were done about him, everything that I read, and also his Facebook page has a little bit of information. So basically what I was able to tell is that Carlo was a very religious man who had lived in New York most, if not all of his life. His page says that he graduated from Lafayette High School in Brooklyn in 1979, and Brooklyn is where he lived with his daughters and was later killed. It also stated that he had worked for J.P. Morgan Chase on Wall Street at one point, but was now working at a local diner where he was very well liked. After he was killed, a memorial was set up for him on the counter of Mike's Diner where he worked, and everyone who's spoken out about him so far has just said that he was a very nice and well-liked man. The type of guy who would notice you were having a bad day and go out of his way to try to make it better. And a woman who worked with him at the diner said of him, and I quote, "He kind of treated me like I was one of his own. Like if it was a late night and I was coming out of work late, he would make sure I got home safe. He would make sure all of us got home safe. We were all doing okay." Another coworker said he was just a beautiful man who would go out of his way to bring brownies or cookies or cupcakes, you know, like sweets to work just for his coworkers because he was a nice guy. But his coworkers also said that in the days leading up to his murder, something did seem to be bothering him. He did seem like he had something going on, and he had dropped hints that something wasn't going quite right for him in his home. So the two girls are in the hospital. In the meantime, police are doing everything they can to find any sort of evidence that would help them solve this case at all, and find any sort of evidence to show who these two suspects even were. They were looking for witnesses, they were looking for video surveillance, they were looking for any sort of clue that would prove that these two men even existed. And it was looking more and more, the more they looked, that they didn't at all, for a few reasons. One, there were no men caught on any surveillance camera near the home at the time of the attack. And there was no real motive. There was no large amount of cash or any drugs found at the crime scene, and the victims had no criminal records. And another thing, though there was a broken window, which was the only sign of forced entry, it was broken from the inside. And even if police were still, you know, uncertain, unsure if what they were looking at really was an inside job, you know, even though I'm sure that their, you know, little lizard brains were ticking off like crazy, Liana was alive. She was gravely injured, but she was alive. And she made statements to police that really brought down Nikki's web of lies. She said to police, quote, "My sister stabbed me." And this was just like 2 days, I think, 2 days before Liana's 20th birthday, by the way. So police go to Nikki and they confront her while she's just sitting there chilling, not killing. And they're like, "Hey, so your story has hella holes in it, bro. Like, first off, the window, like that was broken from the inside. And also, like, there was no surveillance camera footage that caught anyone entering your home. And there were like cameras, so we can see like somebody should be on camera and they weren't. And also, like, your sister kind of said that you did it. Low key, she was like, hey, my sister stabbed me." And I guess Nikki just completely like broke down and confessed. And people who knew the family were not surprised to learn she was the one who did it. So now I'm going to tell you what we know about Nikki so far. Nikki is a 22-year-old aspiring model who has 15,000 followers on Instagram. So I guess that might make her an influencer. In the articles, they're referring to her as an influencer, but I don't really know what makes one an influencer. I mean, I know like having influence, right? But is there like a certain number cap you have to hit? And if so, is 15,000 the number? Does that mean I'm an influencer? I don't think so. But anyways, she did an interview at one point, which I watched. It's on this channel on YouTube called United We Rant. And on this channel, from what I can tell, their focus is bringing attention to the transgender community, transgender human beings. At least that's what I got from the one interview I watched, which was Nikki's, because she is a transgender woman. She said she realized she was trans when she was just 5 years old. She said that her awakening was when she was at the store with her mom, Target, or Target, if you are like my family was, because that's what my mom always said. And her mom tried to buy her some swimming trunks, like you know, little shorts, and she had a full-blown meltdown, Nikki did, over the choice. Like, she was like, listen, like, this is not the bathing suit for me, because I'm a little girl, right? Like, that was her, and she was 5 years old. Anyway, Nikki and her family lived in suburban New Jersey prior to her parents divorcing, and after that, the girls went on to live with their father. By the time Nikki was 16, she had already started taking hormones to have her gender reassignment. I don't know the whole procedure. I've never done it. But she started doing that, and she said, and by all accounts, by her admission and by all accounts from those who knew her, her father was like very supportive. He even paid for her procedure and took care of her when she was in recovery. And she said of coming out to her parents, and I quote, "My dad had a strong personality. He didn't let it affect him. My mom surprisingly took it a little harder than my dad." That was the way that happened. Carlo was said to be the type of guy who was very supportive of his daughter's choices and would stand up for her and for his support in her whenever the opportunity would arise. Like when they were in their town and people would be like, "How could you do that? How could you let your daughter do that?" Well, they weren't referring to her as a daughter, I'm sure, because it was people who were questioning his choices. Like, "How could you let her do that? Don't you know that's a sin? Blah, blah, blah." And Carlo was like, "Listen, if you think everything in the Bible's true, then you are fucking crazy." So, but this was who he was a little bit later. When she had first came out, it wasn't like he was perfectly into it. It took him a little bit of adjustment, a little time to get used to the idea. I feel like that's common with a lot of parents, especially when there's like a generation difference, cultural differences. This is more common we see. Like it's just the truth. It's just from my experience, from what I have seen, that can be true. And Nikki said that though he did end up supporting her 100%, she said her father was, quote, "a traditional Italian man who wanted nothing to do with her transition to a woman," end quote. That's how he was at first. She said initially her parents were both speechless and just didn't know what to say. They were a very religious family, like church every Sunday religious. And her father was also conservative, like he was a big Trump supporter. And as we know, Trump was an outspoken critic of the transgender community. So that would be a complicated situation by all accounts. But he did end up coming to terms with it and was accepting. Now, why did this happen? The motive hasn't been released yet. It probably isn't, well, it probably is known, at least by her defense team, but if she has a defense team, I don't know, because that information hasn't come out yet. But so far, we don't know why it happened. All we know is what we've learned from neighbors and people who knew the family, and people who were privy to the family's life, you know, who saw their day-to-day, things like that, said that prior to the murder and the attempted murder, they had a pretty toxic relationship. Like there was a lot of loud, public fights, and it would get to the point that the police had to be called several times. I guess the police ended up coming at least 3 times to break up domestic issues prior to the murder. Once a year before the murders, when one of his daughters attacked him, though it hasn't been stated if it was Nikki or if it was Liana, then the July before his murder, when allegedly Carlo threatened to kill his youngest daughter, Liana. He was charged with harassment, and the cops did a search of the house to make sure that there were no guns. And this is weird because this is just not how he was described at all, but that is what has been reported. It has also been revealed that Nikki got a temporary order of protection against her father and sister earlier in 2022 after she claimed that they threatened to kill her. Apparently, she told police that her father was in the mob and had slapped her and wanted to have her killed. For the record, though, authorities do not believe Carlo had any mob connections and that she was just kind of making that up. But anyways, shortly after that happened, it was reported that Liana was charged with assault and criminal mischief for allegedly cutting Nikki's hand and tearing down some window blinds. So there was just like a lot going on behind closed doors in that home prior to this happening. It just goes to show you that you really never know what people are going through, and this is why you should just be kind, right? Because you don't know what's going on. Like, people had their suspicions. Carlo had opened up to them a little bit and let them know that some stuff was happening and that there were some issues, but no one knew just how serious it was, and no one thought it would ever come to this. He would mostly just tell people that his daughter was lazy and wouldn't get a job. Like, that was his biggest beef. That was his biggest issue. Like, you don't have a job. You're not in school. So you need to get going with something because I'm literally supporting you. You're living in my house. I'm supporting you. You're not doing anything. Let's go. He would tell people about the fights, how his daughter was, quote, acting crazy, but he didn't think that she was a danger to herself or to others or anything like that. He would just say that she had problems, that she liked to fight all the time, that she was having a bad day, that she was being a headache, things like that. Things that, quite frankly, my own mother would have said about me when I was living with her at about the age of 22. Well, actually, I moved out right before then. I moved out at 21, I think. But prior to that, she would have said very similar things. Don't you? And I didn't fucking kill her. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have done it. So that just shows you that, like, you don't know what's going on, man. You don't know what's going on. One thing, though, that's pretty ominous is that Carlo had been a little more open with one of his coworkers. This was a woman, I believe her name was Yadira, and I think she was actually his boss. And she said that Carlo had confided in her that just like the day before the murders, him and Nikki had been fighting a lot, and he was feeling really uncomfortable. He was feeling kind of nervous, and he told Yadira that he had told his youngest daughter, Liana, that he wanted her to go. That he wanted her to get out of the house because he didn't feel good and didn't know what was going to happen, and that he just wanted her to be out of the house in case something went down. So within a day, Nikki was arrested and she was charged with second-degree murder and second-degree attempted murder, as well as weapon charges. And she was held without bail and she was transported to Rikers Island, and while she was on her way there, she was brandishing, you know, her wounds on her hands because that was her only injury. And these wounds, by the way, were described as slash or stab marks, and they haven't figured out, at least at the time that I'm recording, they hadn't figured out how she got those wounds. They could maybe be from a fight, or they could be from, you know, defending herself if it turns out she wasn't the one who did this. But I'll get into the confession soon. And to me, at least, it seems like she did it, but who knows? Innocent till proven guilty, right? But it was also stated that it's possible that she could have sustained these injuries when the knife slipped during an attack. Now, when Nikki was questioned, she was read her rights and all that jazz, all the things you do when you're going to be questioning a suspect to make sure you've covered all your bases. Once they started to question Nikki, once she started to talk, they were like, oh shit. Because according to the criminal complaint, Nikki told officers of that day of the murder and attempted murder, and I quote, "I came out of the bedroom and I saw my father sitting on a couch sleeping, and I bashed his head in with a hammer. I grabbed my favorite German steel knife and I stabbed the shit out of him. My sister came out of her bedroom and tried to stop me, and then I stabbed her in the back, head, and stomach. I wanted them dead. If I saw the 911 caller, she would be next. I didn't plan it. I didn't need to. I don't remember where I put the knife, but I'm sure you'll find out." So thank God that neighbor didn't open the door, right? She was literally banging on that neighbor's door to get her to open the door. I just can't imagine being that neighbor. Knowing that, and knowing that Nikki was outside of her door banging for her to open the door, and that Nikki just wanted to kill her. And I feel like this neighbor has to have some trauma around this, because she like heard it all happen. She said that the walls there are like sheetrock, so you can hear everything through it. So she hears Nikki banging and screaming. She says one of the things that she really remembers is that Nikki's bloody fingerprints were all over her door. And then she hears Carlos screaming out to her by her name, begging her to call the cops. And then knowing that this is what happened and this is what was on the other side of that door, that's fucking wild, bro. Anyways, Nikki was arrested, and as she was led away from the police station towards the jail, towards the clink clink, as some people say. Do people say that? I sure don't say that. As she was led away, she didn't say anything to the sea of reporters. She completely ignored him. She simply just smirked to the cameras as she was led away. Smirked to the cameras after murdering her father and trying to murder Liana. So Carlo was dead and Liana was in the hospital, and she was in critical condition. And it's so sad, man. This girl is going to have so much to deal with once she gets out of the hospital. Last I checked, she wasn't yet, but who knows? She could be by the time that you're watching. She should be by the time that you're watching this shit. Like, it's just sad because she lost her father and her sister all in one fell swoop. And she wasn't even, like, this is what's so messed up, is she wasn't even supposed to be there. She was literally home from college visiting for the holidays. She had plans to just go see her boyfriend after when this happened. I really just wonder what happened here, because I get that the relationship was toxic. That seems to be clear. There seems to have been a lot of fighting and a lot of just like a not good situation. But from what it sounds like, based on even what Nikki's saying, is it sounds like he was ambushed. The way she describes coming up to him while he's sleeping on the couch and just attacking him with a hammer. Like, why? Like, what happened that made that night the night? What happened that made it escalate to her attacking him and killing him in his sleep? And then her poor sister just running out to her dad's aid, and then this happening to her? Like, ugh. And speaking of Liana, speaking of her sister, because I don't want you to think that I forgot about her in all of this, there just, again, wasn't a ton of information on her, just like there wasn't a ton of information on Carlo. What I was able to find out is that Liana was said to be the type of person who brought joy and happiness everywhere that she went, that she was a real sunshine type of person, the color yellow, if you know, you know, and that her and her father were very close and that he loved her very much. In Liana's LinkedIn profile, which has the header, quote, "Stand for Justice," end quote, it states that she attended Lehigh University after graduating from New Rochelle High School, and it also stated that she was a second-year student majoring in journalism and economics with a minor in French. Her profile says, quote, "I am passionate about writing and am particularly interested in writing about human interest and profiles, animal sciences, healthcare systems, and technology. I also have interests in public speaking, marketing, and advertising and planning. When I'm not writing, you can find me reading, hiking, listening to music, and writing creatively." And for an update, so you know what's going on with Liana. Liana is alive. At the time that the last update was put on her GoFundMe page, which was on January 4th, it's January 9th when I'm filming this, but on January 4th, it said that she was doing well, that she had recently had her last surgery. She was still in the hospital and was resting in her room at the hospital, which is filled with flowers, cards, and gifts from friends. She's said to be positive considering what she's going through and thankful for the support that she's been given during this time. There is a GoFundMe page set up and the goal is $100,000, and this money is to go towards Liana to help support her once she's out of the hospital, since she's literally lost her entire family. It's so fucked up. I guess on day one, that page was flooded, and by midday on the first day, they had already raised $10,000. So I'm gonna go ahead and link it down below in case any of you have it in your heart or your budget, quite frankly, to donate, because we're in the unique situation where this is a newer case, so we can do something to help monetarily instead of just, you know, thoughts and prayers after the fact, because usually I cover older cases. And the GoFundMe page runner or organizer said, and I quote, "Right now, Liana needs our support due to tragic events, so please give if you are able." But that is it. That is what we know so far. That is the story of the tragic murder of 61-year-old Carlo Secondino and the attempted murder of his daughter, 19-year-old Liana. I hope you found this case to be interesting and informative, and I hope I gave you all the information you would want thus far. Obviously, this is all we know so far. Maybe I can do an update video, or we can do a live, I can do a short, something like that, or I can put it on TikTok or Instagram, so make sure to be following over there once more information comes out. But thank you for remembering them with me today, because it's a really, really sad case, and it's like heartbreaking. This girl lost her entire family, and I can't imagine what that trauma must have been like. But now that I've told you all the information, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that is this. What do you believe Nikki's motive was for murdering her father and trying to murder her sister? Please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Before you leave, please don't forget to let me know down below of any cases you'd like to see me cover in the future as well. As this case indicates, if you leave me a suggestion, I will try to cover it. Right? Great, cool. I have a long list of cases, and every time you leave me a suggestion, I put your suggestion on it with your name next to it, so if I cover it, I can give you a shout out. I love looking into the cases that you guys suggest, because oftentimes you bring cases to my attention that I might not have known about, cases that need more coverage that people should know about, and I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste, otherwise you wouldn't be here. If you haven't yet, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my merch store and a link to my membership where you can get early access to videos, polls, occasional live streams, things like that. I want to say one more thank you to Dossier for sponsoring today's video. It's sponsors like Dossier that make it possible for this to be my job, right? Like, I do it every week because I have the time to do it every week, because I have sponsors who support this channel. You know what I mean? Otherwise I would have to have a full-time job, in which case I wouldn't be able to put out videos like I do, quite frankly. So I want to thank them for that, and thank you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.